Historical Society. It's July the 16th, 2003, and I'm here to interview Lucille Kopa at the home of June Paquette at 15 Oxford in Hastings-on-Hudson. Okay, so, is it all right if I call you Lucille? Very good. Lucille, is it Kopa, your last name? Okay, and where do you live now?
I live in Florida.
Okay, and where were you born?
I was born in Yonkers, New York,
Okay, and what day? We don't mind me asking.
December 27th, 1927.
Okay, and how long did you live in Hastings?
Oh, we lived in Hastings for, let's see, maybe about 6 years. And then we bought a house in Shrub Oak, New York.
Okay. Of course, I don't even know where Shabok is.
It's up a little past Yorktown near Peekskill. It's below Peekskill.
Okay.
Right between Yorktown and Peekskill.
Oh, that's a pretty area. And not
Yeah.
that far from Hastings, so you could
No,
still
it's
see your
right
friends.
off the Taconic Parkway. You
Okay.
pass the sign when you go up the Taconic.
Okay. And what was your husband's name?
George.
Okay. And had he lived all his life in Hastings?
Until he went in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And he was in the Marine Corps for 22 years.
Okay. And did you have children?
Yes, we had 2 boys, George Arthur and Michael Thomas.
Great. Well, I guess of course, the reason that I very much wanted to interview you was because of the romance of the story of how you met your husband. But maybe you could tell us a little bit of how you met him. First of all, I mean, how did you end up being in Hastings since you were a Yonkers girl?
And this friend of mine, we went to Hastings. We were going to go to the Green Tavern to get a pizza. And then we decided to go over to the Farragut because they said they had a piano player downstairs, and it was very nice down with I guess like they call it a Rathskeller or something. And my friend and I went down and we sat at the table and we had a drink. And there were a lot of men, fellas at the bar at the other end. We were way at the other end of the room, and the waitress came and she took our orders, Jerry. And then all of a sudden, this fella came and he dropped a handkerchief at my table, which was my husband now. And he sat right down and he said, "I have a bet," he said, "that I could just sit here and talk to you for 5 minutes," he says. And then he started giving me a big line, telling me, what beautiful eyes I had and all that stuff, you know what I mean. And so we got talking and everything. So he said to the waitress, because we were talking, and he said to the waitress, Jerry, because he knew Jerry, because she was from Hastings, and she said, "Introduce me to this young lady." So she did. I can't remember her last name. She worked as a waitress in the Farragut Inn at the time, but then she worked in a bank in Hastings for a long time, and I can't think of her last name. Her sister worked in the florist in Hastings, but anyway, he knew everybody, and so she introduced me, and we were talking, and we got along very nicely. And then he came home on the bus, because we had to take the Hastings bus back down to North Broadway and Roberts Avenue, and then he came with us and walked us up the hill, up Roberts, and then my mother and father were just pulling into the driveway at the time when he came down the hill, and my mother invited him for dinner the next day, Sunday dinner. So my father drove him back down to get the bus again to go back to Hastings, and that's how we met.
Well, so what day was this? Can you remember the date?
Oh, I don't even remember the date, but it was in the summertime. It was like, I think, around the end of the summer. I think into, wait a minute, I think it was the beginning of September, the end of August. It's such a long time ago, I never really thought about that. I think it must have been the early part of September when I met him.
And how old were you?
Oh, I was only about 19 going on 20.
And how about George?
Oh, George was about 28 at the time.
And what were you doing? Were you a student or?
Oh no, I worked for Alexander Smith's in Yonkers. I was a stenographer there, secretary stenographer. I worked in the claim department for the carpet company down there. That's what I did. And George had just come back from China.
Wow.
He had been, well, he was in, when I met him, he was in the Marine Corps about 12 years. And he had been in World War II, and when he first went in the Marine Corps, he was, when World War II started, he was stationed in Floyd Bennett Field. And then he was in Iwo Jima, and he was in Peleliu, and he was stationed in some other island, I can't remember it, and anyway. But then after World War II, they sent him to China, and he was in China for a while. And then when he came back, that's when I met him in Hastings. So that's really, and then from there, we were only going together 3 months, and he put an engagement ring on my finger, and 53 years we were married.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and when he came back, we were married the following June, not, the next year, because he had to go to Viegas on maneuvers for 4 months, so he wanted to give me an engagement ring before he left. And then when he came back to Viegas, and that next June we got married.
Now, where did you get married?
We were married on Shawnee Terrace by Justice of the Peace, Justice Farley. And, we didn't have very much money. We couldn't afford a big wedding. And see, this is what I mean. This is such a personal, and that's why I really wouldn't want this put in the paper. I'm just telling you the story. And then we were married, and we lived in Dr. Sullivan's. I don't know whether you know where Dr. Sullivan's house was. Do you know 16 School and Christ the King Church on North Broadway? Well, we lived in that big yellow house.
Oh, sure, I know that.
Dr. Sullivan had been our family doctor for years, and he had 2 daughters, and it was a huge house. It was what I call a father's knows best house. And they had a beautiful attic, and they made it into like a honeymoon apartment for their daughters, because when one daughter got married, she left. And then the other daughter got married, and she lived up there. So they asked me if I would be interested, when they saw my engagement in the paper, if I would be interested in renting the apartment, because they knew me. And it was just a little apartment, but it was the most adorable. I fixed it up so cute that she used to bring all her friends up to fix it, because it had the little half-moon windows on the top, and then the middle window. And I had more closets than I've ever had in any house I have, because they had so much storage space up there. And they would go away and leave George and I in that whole house, But we were only there a year, because then he was transferred to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and that's when we had to give up the apartment. And then we were only in Camp Lejeune about 3 or 4 months when Korea broke out. And then he went to Korea.
Oh my gosh.
And then he was gone for eight months, almost a year. And then when he came home.
So did you ever go back to the Farragut Inn after that first meeting?
Oh, we used to go back. Every time we came up, didn't we, June? We would go there and have a drink. And, of course, we go there now. It's such a dump. It's a shame because, Hastings is such a pretty little town. It's a shame somebody doesn't take that place over and fix it up.
Well, tell me what the Farragut Inn was like. It must, because for a young girl like you to go into the Rathskeller, it must have been pretty nice.
Well, it was very nice. They had a bar at one end, and then it was all very nice tables. And they had this that fella used to played the piano down there. This is at the time when I met George. And they also had a jukebox there. And then upstairs they had like the big dining room with the tables and the booths and everything.
Now, was that at ground level?
That was right on the street
Right.
level. And then they had the bar in the front, like they do now. Do they still have the bar in the front?
I haven't been there in years.
I mean,
but think
where the window
Right.
is. Yeah, they had a bar there also, and the dining room. And then George used to take me there every Wednesday night for lobster dinner when we were going together. And sometimes he used to take me to the Rock House also. We went to the Rock House.
Now, where was the Rock House?
That's what what do they call that place?
Riverview.
The Riverview. That's what the Riverview is now, but it used to be the Rock House, and it was beautiful. And they just had a little tiny bar in there, but we just used to go for dinner because they had a big fireplace, and we'd sit. They'd give us a very nice table by the fireplace, and we used to have dinner there, and it was just wonderful. It was just such a pretty little town, and just beautiful.
So were these like Farragut Inn or the Rock House places where people would go to eat or to have a drink or both?
They would go have a drink or have a meal, And we went there many times for dinner. In fact, when my aunt was in the Anders home, we used to take her there for lunch until she just died a couple of years ago. And we used to take her there for lunch just recently. And
So how would you describe the kind of people who would go into the Farragut Inn at that point?
hometowners. people that lived in Hastings, and people from the manor that would come down and have a drink. You know, you'd see people, you know, that you knew from the manor. And
So would they be sitting at tables or booths or the
some
bar?
would sit at the bar, some would sit at tables.
Were there different
It was
groups?
more like it was like a family. You know, you knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody else. And I mean, just maybe there might be a few people that would come in on the weekends that you wouldn't know. Like we'd go there and like maybe stop in there for a drink on Saturday night. Like maybe we'd go out dancing someplace, and we'd stop there before we went home. And you know, before George took me home, and we would have a drink, you know, there. And then we would meet Jerry Yankew and Charlie Yankew. I don't know whether you ever heard of them. And that, you know, they were all friends of George's that he knew from when he grew growing up. And who else was it? And you know, Sophie Karshman was up. She got married upstairs. She had the big room. They had like a big room upstairs, and Sophie Karshman had her wedding reception upstairs, and I had mine downstairs.
Oh, I see. So your wedding reception was actually there as well.
Oh,
Oh
yes.
my gosh.
Oh, I thought.
Oh my! I thought,
That-
Shauna Terrace. I think, oh well, you know.
No, yeah. Oh, right. And then we went back, and I had about how many people? Just well, I guess about 100 people I had at the Farragut Inn for our reception.
That's no small wedding.
No, it was
So
wonderful.
tell me about it. You know, what was it like to have a reception there?
Oh,
you
it
have
was very nice. I mean, I had a beautiful wedding cake, and then we had, you know, the table. And of course, we couldn't afford, you know, a lavish, you know, I forget. We just had like, I think it was chicken a la king or something like that. We had. Huh?
Buffet? Or did you have a sit-down
No, we had a
dinner?
sit-down dinner,
Oh.
you know, and they served everybody. And we had like a little combo, like trio. I think there was a guy had accordion but anyway, you know, we had like a trio there. And we had dancing. Everybody had a wonderful time. And it was just lovely.
So did they make the wedding cake, or did you bring that in from a bakery somewhere?
No, I had it made and they brought it in. And then Jerry and Mr. Anderson took care of everything else, you know, but it was just wonderful.
So tell me about Jerry.
She worked as a waitress there.
Right.
And then she introduced George and I, but then, you know, we would see her all the time when we'd go there. And of course, George knew her.
Right.
Because, you know, she was from his hometown.
But was she related to the owners at all?
No, she just worked there. She just worked there. And then later on, I know that from another friend that she worked in the Hastings Bank for a long time. I don't know, you know, what she's doing now, but
Right.
this was, you know, for many years she worked there.
And how about the owners of the Farragut Inn? Did you
Well,
know
now
them?
Charlie Anderson almost lost it. And then he died, and then somebody else took it over. And I don't know too much about it, except that it changed hands quite a few times.
But during this key time for you meeting and getting married, was he very much...
Charlie Anderson was
Right.
he was the main...
And did you see him pretty regularly there?
Oh, he used to wait on us. He would bring the lobster a lot of times, because he knew George, and, you know, him and George used to talk and kid around. My husband was very outgoing, you know, he was always... And my brother-in-law will always tell the story when he used to come through town and he'd meet everybody. They never asked him how he was. They always wanted to know how his brother George the Marine was. Yeah. So, I mean, that's about all I can tell you.
I'm trying to think of some of those questions, because part of it is that someone like me, who only knows Hastings House as it is today,
Oh,
to
it
a
was
man...
very nice. It was beautiful. They had nice Venetian blinds on the windows, and it was clean. It had a beautiful, I don't know whether they still have the same wallpaper, but they had beautiful flowered wallpaper in the dining room. And it was very clean. Charlie kept it very clean, and the bar part was always very nice, you know, too. It's nothing like it is now. I mean, it's really a dump now. I mean, I wouldn't even want to go in there. It's just so awful. The last time we were there, which was a few years ago, I just thought it was horrible, and I was so
But
disappointed.
we didn't go into the restaurant part, we only stopped for a drink.
Yeah,
and
we
the
only
bar
stopped
was
for a drink, and they had
But
like these little
you can't really
booths, and we
say
sat
that
in
the
the
restaurant
booths.
part is horrible, because we haven't
No,
been in there.
because we haven't been in there, and then
That
of
might
course.
still be nice for all we know.
Yeah, but I knew the ladies' room the last time I was there needed a lot of repairs. It was really horrible. But
My sister's the original white club, so.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. But at the time of your wedding reception, then it was very different.
Oh, it was beautiful.
What was the floor like? Because you said you had dancing. Was it a wooden
Right.
floor?
A
or-
wooden floor that I remember. Yes. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was a wooden floor, wasn't it?
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. And the trio that you got to
Oh,
play,
I
were they
wouldn't-
from
I-
Hastings?
I don't even know who they were.
Right.
I don't even know. I think my father hired them. You know, I don't even know who they were.
Now, you have to tell me about the people who stood up with you.
Oh, well, okay. This is my husband, George.
Right.
He was just so handsome.
Oh, I'm telling
Honest
you.
to God, he was the best looking guy.
You weren't too bad yourself, as they say.
Oh, thanks. This is me, and then this is my girlfriend, Dorothy Curran. She worked for Dr. Rosh in Yonkers for years, but she's dead now. She had cancer. She's
Mhm.
died. And this is my brother-in-law, Frank. He's still alive. He lives in Mamaroneck. And right now, he and his wife are up visiting their son in North Dakota. His son bought a house in North Dakota, and they love it up there, so they went up to visit them.
That's great.
So-
So tell me a little bit about what you're wearing.
Oh, like I say, I couldn't afford very much. And I love the color blue. And she had a pink dress. And I had a blue, this was like a blue lace on the bottom and a thing. And then I had bought this blue netting to put around the hat. And we went to the Waldorf Astoria for our honeymoon. We went down there for the weekend because like I said, we only spent about 3 days there. And then we went to Connecticut for a while. But I'm walking into the Waldorf Astoria. I felt like a country bumpkin with my big corsage and my hat, and they looked at me and I said, well, we made a reservation a very long time ago. And they said to us, well, we can't find the reservation, but, we had sent them a letter and everything. And they brought us up to this room and it was awful. It had like a studio couch and everything. I said, this is not at all, I said, what I had requested, So they went back downstairs and they told us to wait a while. So then the fellow came back up, one of the managers he was, and he was so nice, and he took us, they gave us the most beautiful suite you want to see. We had a living room, we had a beautiful dressing room with a bathroom, the tub was huge, and we had beautiful cherry beds and it was a beautiful suite they gave us. And they only charged us $24.18. I still have the bill home in my scrapbook. Can you imagine? Because he had been in the service, in World War II, and they didn't charge us hardly anything. They were just wonderful.
Plus, you were a very charming young couple, I'm sure.
And you know what else they did? They took us up to the top floor of the Waldorf Astoria and showed us where Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill met at that big meeting they had. This beautiful suite. It had all these white satin couches and it overlooked that East River or that, whatever that view is there. I think it's that park, and it was like a lake in it. I guess it was Central Park. I don't know. I'm not a New York person. I don't really know too much about New York City. But we didn't have much, but it was just wonderful.
It sounds
Whatever
absolutely great. But at the reception, were people drinking? I mean, did they?
Oh yeah, we had drinks. They were drinking, and we had there was beer and wine and liquor, whatever, And like I said, I think we had chicken a la king, and my cake was just gorgeous, and it was wonderful.
That's great. And now,
Everybody
do they have beer on tap there at that
Yes,
place?
they served pitchers of beer, not bottles of beer,
Right.
pitchers of beer.
And where did the beer come from? Do you know?
From the bar. They
No,
brought
no.
it-
I mean, did they make it locally or
Oh, no, I have no idea. I wouldn't know. I couldn't tell you anything about that.
about that?
Mm-mm.
Well, one thing, I mean, because it's changed so much, now for the Hastings House, not Farragut Inn, and the whole character of it's changed. I'm trying to be careful not to make too many assumptions, but at that point there must have been quite a few other bars in Hastings.
Yes, there was Seabo's, and there was Ansel's. That's the place now that's on the bridge.
Tony's.
That restaurant.
All right,
Tony's.
It is now.
Tony's. It was then Ansel's.
right.
And Seabo's.
Dunn's.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know
Down the
anything.
street.
Yes, there was Dunn's. I never was in there. And what else? And there was a place down the hill. On the hill, that was like, I guess, a bar, with a place in the back. Somebody told me they had a place
Quite a
there.
few. Not
There
in
was
the
quite a
village,
few.
so we had Hastings
And
we had them along Sawmill Mills.
and then, of course, right across the bridge, there was one. I never was in that one.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
the
that was an
Lucian's?
Italian restaurant, I
Lucian's?
think. What's the name?
Lucian's?
Yeah, there was Lucian's too, but that isn't the one I mean. This one had a fire, I think, a couple of years ago. And it's right at the end of
Oh,
the
the old
bridge.
Time Out?
Could be, I don't know the name of the place. And
But were there certain ones that it was okay to, for a nice girl to go to, and other ones where you stay away from
Well, the
them?
Farragut Inn was fine.
Right.
And Ansell's, because they had people, a lot of older people used to go there, and have sandwiches and beer and stuff like that. Ansell's was very, very nice to go to. But the other places were, and Lucian's, because we used to all meet, like Jerry Ankew and her sister-in-law Bevels and her boyfriend, and Georgetown. We'd all meet there later on, sometimes on Saturday night when we'd go out, because everybody sort of congregated there about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning,
Oh my
and we'd
God.
have like the last night's drink there at Lucian's, because it was really nice then, and Lucian kept the place really nice. That was a very pretty place.
And was that on Warburton?
On
Lucian?
Warburton Avenue, and of course the Rock House, but that was way down the end. That was almost on the Yonkers line, but that was really a beautiful place. That was very, very nice. I loved going there too. And but that's where he used to take me. We'd either go to the Farragut Inn or to the Rock House,
So did he know all the bartenders everywhere?
Oh, he knew every place, that wherever he went, he knew her. Except the Rock House, he didn't know too many people there. That was more or less out of Hastings. But everybody in Hastings, he knew, because he was raised there. His father and mother were Czechoslovakian, and they came to this country. They met here, his mother and father, and they married. They had children. Then they went back to, George was born here, but then they went back to Czechoslovakia. And when George came back to this country, he couldn't speak a word of English, and they came back on Halloween. And he was so frightened because he didn't know what Halloween was. And when they came up to Hastings, all these people were in masks and funny costumes, and he was frightened to death, because he didn't know what it was all about. And but he always tells that story when he used to come back.
That was probably the last time he was ever scared of anything.
Oh yeah, true. He was quite a guy, my husband. Mm.
Oh boy. Well, it's just, you said it was such a pretty town in those
It
days.
was.
So how was it different from the way it is now? If you were going to try to paint the picture for me, since
Well, there were like more mom and pop stores, like Al Spiegel grocery stores, the A&P. There wasn't all these big. They didn't have the big A&P then. Even the one before this, they didn't have that. And they had the nicest little like old-fashioned ice cream store. What was the Brunings owned the ice cream store at the end of town, on the other end,
It used to be the Covens also.
Yeah,
And
and
I
I
don't know if you
remember when
remember that.
we lived in River Pines, after, we came back, and I'm trying to remember, all these things. When we lived in River Pines after he came back from Korea, and when my son was born, my girlfriends and I, we would wheel the children in the carriages down to Brunings, and we'd push them all in the back, and we'd have ice cream, and we'd treat ourselves to lunch once a week, when we go down and do our shopping. And they had a very nice florist there, and they also had the car dealer. We bought a couple of cars off them, and but I loved the ice cream store, because they used to make all their own ice cream and their chocolates on Easter. She'd have those big chocolate eggs in the window, those huge chocolate eggs, and they made all their own salads and sandwiches and stuff like that. It was just wonderful. And and they had 2 bakeries, which the German bakery was the best, really. The bakery on the other end of town, near the ice cream store, was not as good. Everything used to taste the same kind of.
and where
there.
was the German bakery?
The German bakery was right next to Seabo's, right across from that stationery store and the drugstore that's
Right.
in Hastings. It used to be right across the street there. I don't know what's there now, but it was the greatest. And we all go there after Mass on Sunday, to get our bread and rolls and buns and stuff like that,
So even though there were so many, bars and everything, it
Mm.
didn't strike you as being a rough town?
No. The only time that they had a problem, and this was before I even met my husband, and my father told me this story, and because he knew, my father was a Yonkers fireman, and then my uncles were policemen, Yonkers policemen, so they had the Green Tavern. Evidently they used to make book in the back, and they would have gambling going on, and they brought the state police in, and they took over the whole town. They took over the whole town because of the gambling in Hastings
Oh
at
my
one
gosh.
time.
Do you have any idea of when that would have been?
I have no idea, but it was like, I would say in the It was before. It was either during World War II or before, But this was one story my father had always told us about that. And the and the Green Tavern also. That was another. Where we used to go for pizza. That was the only place you could get
Best
pizza.
place for pizza.
And where
Yeah.
was it?
That was on Main Street.
It's right across from Menzies.
Right across from
What is it?
where the parking lot is
Right.
there.
Pizza.
Right there, right across the street there. And
Still pizza.
I think they opened up kind of like it's very new. I think it just opened. Some kind of a...
The low carb place.
Yes, exactly.
Who knows?
Right.
yeah, I'm just trying to think. Oh, and they had a hardware store there. Antonisio's owned that. We bought a television and a washing machine from them when we were first married. And I'm trying to think what else. And there was that diner they had, and all the truck drivers used to stop there. I never was in there, but they said the food was very good. And it was like a little diner at the end of town. And this couple, George knew them very well, and they ran the diner for years, and they never could have any children. And she had a child very late in life. They were so happy. I remember that. George told me about that one. And then what else was there? Let's see. And of course they had the liquor store. But I think the liquor store was right on Woodburton Avenue, right next to
They
the...
had a bunch of liquor stores in Hastings.
Yeah, well, I'm
Oh,
sure.
my
I don't
God.
remember. I remember a couple of them.
So we have all these bars and all these liquor stores, but it still struck you as a really nice,
Oh, it
friendly
was.
family place.
Right, because everybody that went in the bars, everybody knew each other, They were like these Irish pubs, in Ireland, but, everybody, even the children go into them, they're like...
So in fact, did you see children in
Oh,
any
no,
of the
I
bars?
never. In the Farragut Inn, I did. People, would bring their children in for dinner and things like that.
How about a place like Seabo's? What was that like?
Well, Seabo's was just a bar. It had booths and everything, but it was just a bar, I was only in there once with George, but that was more like a man's bar, you know what I mean? And I'm just trying to think where else.
But you thought Ansell's was nice.
Ansel's, George and I never went there, but, as I said, we're older couples. My mother and father and my uncles and aunts used to go up there sometimes on Friday night, and they would have sandwiches, and they'd have a pitcher of beer, and, they'd go up there sometimes on Friday night. What they used to call that, the Friday night club, when they used to go up there? Yeah. And, but it was a really nice town, and, it was my mother used to call it George Kopa's Hastings.
Well, that was nice being Queen of Hastings. But then you had to go and move away.
Well, we would have loved to bought a house in Hastings, but houses are very expensive, and so we bought what we could afford. But we had a very lovely house up in Trip Oak. We had a nice big split level and big 3-bedroom. It was really nice. We had a half acre. And then when our son was transferred from IBM down to Florida, then we sold it and we went down there.
So where have you been living in Florida?
We live in Delray Beach.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
pretty.
We have a little villa there. It's very nice. We're in like a senior complex, and we have security, and we have 3 pools, tennis courts, and we have a very nice clubhouse. And my sister has a condo there, and she comes down in the winter. And but I have a little villa, and we were very happy there. We were there for how many years? 19 years before he died.
Wow.
Yeah, he just died last November.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah, but we had 53 wonderful years, and he was a wonderful husband and a wonderful father.
Well, I guess it's hard to say that you want more, but it sounds like it's
I
pretty
have a lot of
sad.
good memories, wonderful memories, really great memories.
No, because Holly had tears in her eyes too. She showed me a recent picture.
She loved Uncle George, yeah. He was a
Yeah.
great guy. I have a picture of him when we were stationed in Kaneohe Bay for almost 3 years in Hawaii, and my youngest son was born out there. And when I was pregnant with my youngest son out there, he had to go back to California because he was called on for recruitment, and he had to give speeches and everything there, and he was gone for a month. And when he came back, Shirley Temple Black's sister-in-law was the society editor on the Hawaiian paper out there, and she interviewed him, and they took a big picture of him in color, and they had him on the Sunday, like, you know, those pictorial review. He was right on the thing, and I have, one of my sons has a copy of it, and I have the other one, but it's just, I used to be so proud when I was going with him, you know, when he'd take me to the movies and everything, because he was a tech sergeant when I was going with him, and he'd have all these stripes, you know, on his arms, and there was ribbons and everything.
Heads would turn.
Huh?
I bet.
Heads would turn.
Well, how tall was he?
Oh, he was 6'2". He would have been taller, but he was a little bit bow-legged. You know,
Oh, she wouldn't let him wear shorts. But,
No, God, he was. Like, oh,
He
so
wasn't
handsome.
thin though so much.
No, oh God, he was so good looking. He really was so handsome. You know.
He always had a beautiful head of hair, right?
Oh, and he
Yeah.
always had the greatest head of hair, and even, you know, when he got older, his hair was just so silvery, and just, you know, and he just.
All the
Some
widows
men.
in Florida were after him.
Right, I had
So
to watch. I
taken.
can tell you, those widows, they really are something. Oh
He
boy.
held court at the pool.
Oh God, I'll tell you. Oh, I'm telling you.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
Well, I
When
mean,
she came, they look at her like,
I know you're not exactly frail. I mean, that's the amazing thing to think of you living in a senior living complex because both of you look so young. I mean that. It's
Well, I'm going to be 76 in December.
Yeah.
You know, George was,
68.
he was 83 when he died. You know.
well, but it's just funny in those days. I can imagine he knew everybody from childhood
Oh,
in
he
Hastings,
did.
and
He
then
did.
with the Marine connection, he really
Mhm.
did you get the feeling that people kind of treated him like a special person
Oh,
because
yes,
of the military
definitely.
connection?
Yes, definitely. You know, and everybody was always so very glad to see him when they saw him. And when I brought him up from Florida to be waked at the Hastings funeral home, and there were so many people that came that knew him from when he was a child. I only had it in the paper one night because we only had one night, and I was just amazed at the people. And even the man in the funeral home said, he said, "You sure had some turnout." He said, you know, for just
Word
one
got
night.
around, yeah.
You know, word got around, and
Plus,
all
he
the
had lost a lot of his friends already.
so many of his friends had passed away, you know, too. Charlie and Rudy Barber, and you know, and the Resnick fella, and then his other friend, John Stargraf. You know, well, of course he lived someplace else, but he was raised in Hastings with George. And but there were so many people came and they would tell me so many nice stories. What a wonderful kid he was, even when he was young. He was always so good-natured and friendly with everybody. And
Where did he grow up as a kid? What street?
Down on Railroad Avenue.
Oh,
His family lived in a cold water flat there, right on Railroad Avenue. And
so he's right in the middle of it all.
he was.
Now, was he part of the South Side Club too?
He belonged to the Southside Club for a while until we moved away, and then you know we didn't belong to that anymore.
Well, was that another place that people used to go for drinks?
Yes, evidently, but we never really went down there. We went to a couple of fairs.
George was more with the vets in Hastings.
Yeah,
You
he
know,
was
they used to
very,
go every Friday
because
night
Charlie
there.
Yankee used to probably
Well,
run the
vets.
veterans on
Vets.
Warburton Avenue there,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And he took care of everything on the vets. I mean, if you wanted to rent the place for any, Charlie took care of everything. Jerry and Charlie, they ran that whole thing.
So what happened there on Fridays?
Oh, Charlie would cook and make coleslaw, and George would come all the way down from Shrub Oak when we lived up in Shrub Oak. On Friday nights, they'd all get down, the fellas would all get together. But after Charlie died, George never went back.
Wow. But it was just men getting together to do this.
There was just the fellas, and they would get together, and Charlie would cook, and they would have a few drinks, and they'd play cards, and you know, it was just a men's thing, you know. But
I mean, that's, I guess, the feeling that I'm getting in Hastings, that there was just a lot more kind of groups of people getting together just to have fun. It doesn't seem to be quite the same anymore. But
yeah.
I mean, did things pack up early in Hastings? On a Friday night, if you were out with George, back in the days when you lived in Hastings, when would you come home?
Oh well, before we had children, I mean, we would come home pretty late, like 3:00 in the morning.
So what would stay open so late,
Well,
Lucille?
the bar stayed open till 3:00. I mean, like I said, and we'd meet like on Saturday night. We'd meet everybody down at Lucian's
Yeah.
or at the Farragut Inn, and we would all sit around and have a nightcap there. And Jerry would sing. Jerry Anker, she'd just burst out singing, and we'd all join in, and we used to have a wonderful time. But they don't. This is not those days. Like I say, it's so different. But it was so wonderful. It was just like everybody knew each other, and everybody had practically been raised together there. And So it was nothing for people to go into a bar and sit down or anything, and, you know, it wasn't like if you went into a bar in Yonkers, oh, people would look at you and say, oh, how terrible she is to come into a bar. But, you know, people didn't feel that way then, you know, because it was just a hometown feeling, you know.
So people didn't use to, well, some people must have been going to the liquor stores and drinking at home.
Oh, you're
Oh, yeah.
on the manor.
All the people up in the manor, right.
What did they used to do? I mean, really,
But
did
you
they
know
just...
what the story was? That they used to call the manor Mortgage Hill.
Right.
Yeah.
And all the money was down on Railroad Avenue and Bridge Street. That the people down there had more money than the people up
They
in the
thought they
manor.
were
That's what it
managers.
used to be, the
Yeah.
story. You know, because they used to call that Mortgage Hill up there.
It's so
Everybody
funny.
had a big mortgage.
So you just figured that those people came down and bought their alcohol and went home?
Oh, sure.
They-
Or
they-
else they hung out someplace else, but.
But you didn't see them in your own hangouts? They weren't...
Oh, yeah, we used to see some people. You know, George knew them. I didn't know them. But George would say hello to some of the people he knew. Because when he was a kid, he delivered newspapers up there,
Right.
you know. when he was-
But did they seem different than the people down in the flats? I mean, or just less friendly? Somehow
Less
out
friendly.
of it?
Let me say less friendly,
Huh.
you know.
Well, maybe they weren't welcomed as much, you know, if they weren't
Well,
part of
a lot of,
the
well, a
family.
lot of them weren't raised in Hastings. I mean, they
Yeah,
were,
no.
you know, they had just maybe come into Hastings.
Right.
Because you have to remember that a lot of the people up in the manor, they were people like soap stars, and also
Executives of the mill.
Dean Jagger lived here one time. He had a home here. Did you know?
I didn't know
up in
that.
the manor, he lived here for years. And Jonathan Winters, when he was like with Jack Parr in New York, you know, on the shows and everything, he lived here for a while. He used to go down to the Green Tavern on Saturday afternoons and drink with the guys all the time. And let me think, who else?
What years would have that been that he would have been doing that?
When was Jonathan Winters here? What
Well,
year? You lived here then, when he was up in the manor. He lived in that big,
Well, then it must
beautiful
be
white house
in
that
the
goes like
60s.
this.
Oh, right.
You know
That's
the one I
that's
mean?
the guy for the Wizard of Oz grew up there. The one on Calumet?
Oh, no, not Billy Burke. Billy Burke.
No,
had
no,
the-
no. I'm talking about off Ballard in Calumet. There's a
Yeah.
big white house that's kind of sideways, the way you're describing. And the guy who played Wizard of Oz grew up in that house.
Oh,
I
I
don't
know
know.
that.
But
Someone
that
know
was Jonathan Winters'
I
house
don't
too?
think that, the one that Jonathan Winters lived was way up on top of the hill, and it overlooked the Hudson River Valley, the one I'm talking about. And it used to be, I don't know whether it's still white, but it sort of was like this,
Mhm.
and it had beautiful property in the front of it. It was set way back, and it overlooked the Hudson River Valley, you know, up in that part of
Right.
the Ballard, up on the top. And that's where he lived, in that house up there. It was a beautiful home. But that's when he was really at his peak. And but he used to go down to the village and drink in the Green Tavern with the guys on Saturday afternoons. Yeah.
Boy, no, because I'm just wondering what those poor people up in the manor did. I mean, they used to have smokers at the firehouse up in the manor.
Yeah, they probably did. You know, I mean, I'm sure they had wonderful. And they used to come to a lot of the VFW affairs. I
Oh.
never told you about those. Because George and I used to go to a lot of those after we were married and when we lived in Hastings. And they would have the dances and they would have different affairs at the vets. And a lot of these people came from the manor that belonged to the veterans. You know, from the manor, but I can't remember their name. Like, Judge, what's his name, and his wife used to come, that used to live here. She was very active in St. Matthew's Mothers Club at the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you remember Marcella Hanlon. And you probably never
No.
knew her. She lived right down from Holly for a long time. But that was before Holly bought her house. But this was my girlfriend. She lived next door to me in River Pines before she bought her house on Ballard Hill. And she belonged to the Mothers Club, and I can't think of their name. But anyway, a lot of them, you know, lived up there.
I don't even know where River Pines is.
Well, it's not called River Pines
It's
anymore.
Hastings' house now, I think. It's the
Oh.
apartments
No,
on Broadway.
Hastings' house is right next door.
Okay, then it's, no.
I don't know what it's called now. It's not called
Hastings
River Pines
Gardens.
anymore.
Hastings Gardens.
Oh, it's Hastings Gardens.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the apartments along Broadway there.
Yeah.
They're all co-ops now.
So while all this was going on, were you still working as a stenographer?
No, I had left when he was transferred to Camp Lejeune because I just left my job
Right.
then, I gave my notice. And then when he was in Korea, I went to work for Habershaw down in Point Street in the office there. And I worked there until he came back from Korea, and that's when I got pregnant after he came back, you know. And then we had a baby. And then he was sent to, we were only in there for a while, and then we went to Quantico. No, we went to Camp Lejeune, we went back to Camp Lejeune, then to Cherry Point, and then we went to Quantico, Virginia. And then from Quantico, we had to leave to come back home again, and he took my oldest son and I back home. We got another apartment back in River Pines, and then he was sent to Japan. And then from Japan, he was very lucky. He was able to get us to Hawaii. And I hadn't seen him for almost 8 months before he got us to Hawaii. And this was, after Korea. So, I did a lot of jumping around. And then my youngest son was born in Hawaii. Oh, it was beautiful out there. We had a wonderful time out there.
Wow. Well, I thank you so much for giving me all this information.
Well, I hope that I have been
it's
some
been
help to
great,
you.
absolutely, because it's really a chance to look back at another time
But you
that's so
really should
different.
get a hold of some of these people that have lived here all their lives, and they could tell you much more. You know
But they
what I
don't
mean?
have such a romantic story about the dropped handkerchief. It's good. But who would you recommend that we talk to?
Gee, I don't know. Jerry Yankew could tell you more things about Hastings and everything.
Well, it's the bars.
Who?
Actually, they're doing on
Right, it's
bars.
specifically
Yeah,
about
because
the
her
bars.
husband ran the VFW, and she was born and raised in this town, and her father had
She
a big
loves to
job
talk.
with Anaconda.
Oh, that's good.
Jerry, they lived right in the back of the high school, and of course, her father was an engineer, I think, for Anaconda, and they lived in the Irish Flats before they bought the house up in back of the high school. But Jerry could tell you because she was born and raised in Hastings, and she knows everything. And she was some beauty when she was young. Was she pretty? After the war, she used to be in all the, the VFW used to have a lot of these, what do they call them? Not recitals, they used to have another name for them. Musicals, and Jerry had a wonderful voice, and she used to be in all the musicals, and she'd sing and everything. That's why I say, when we come into Lucian's on Saturday night, we'd all be sitting around, and Jerry would burst into song, and, we'd all start singing. She's so funny, but she's got great personality. But her husband and my husband got along so well, and my husband was very devastated when he died. He died instantly. He took a heart attack. And he just went so quick. My husband was just devastated because they were such good friends. But they were all a nice bunch of people. They really are. I never met anybody in Hastings I didn't like. Really.
Well, there's not many places you can say that about. Just for me, reading about the South Side
Maybe
Club
one
and
landlady I had. But I won't go into that one.
There's honesty. I just liked all the different nicknames that everybody had. It's just incredible, just keeping track of them and the way that they kept track of each other during the Second World War. It was very much like a family. You got that
My
feeling.
husband was very friendly with this fellow named John Stargraf, and they were like bosom buddies when they were growing up. And John went into the Navy, and my husband went into the Marine Corps. And one time he told me the story when they came home. This was before I knew him. This one time during the war, they came home on leave, and they just happened to be, they got home on leave together at the same time, and the two of them got so smashed in the Farragut Inn one night, they changed uniforms. So, this is just one of the stories that he used to tell me.
If the Farragut Inn could talk.
If the Farragut Inn could talk, But he said they used to have some great times.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
I hope that the Farragut Inn was always good to you, because how many people could say that they met and got married, in the same
had the
place?
reception there in the same place, I know. That's why I always had such a fondness. I always wish that somebody would take it over that had money and just fix it up and, refurbish it. Because it's such a nice little town, It really is.
We always
Just
used to
loved
go out
it.
for dinner for their anniversary.
We
We'd go
always
someplace,
stopped
but
there.
We
We
always
always
made the last
stopped and
stop
had a
at
drink,
Farragut Inn.
you know.
It had to be,
Had
Well-
to stop there.
until it got so small.
If you were lucky enough to have them here for the anniversary, right? You were so many different
we always
places.
managed to get up, but we used to always celebrate our anniversaries together, until we went to Florida, and then we
apart.
weren't always here. Because after we went to Florida, we never usually used to come up until about August, and then we'd be up here for about a month, and then we'd go back. But the only reason I'm up here now is my granddaughter's getting married in September, and
Oh.
she's having a big shower next week. They're having a shower for her, so that's the reason I'm up here for a while.
Well, that's nice, and you could be here for Claire's 13th birthday, too.
Yes, that's right.
It's hard to
We had a
believe.
very nice time with that. And then we were down at the Shore. My brother's, he's on Brigantine Island. He has a beautiful place
Oh,
down there. We had a
gorgeous.
wonderful 4th of July, all of us down there with him. So we have a good life, don't we, Junie?
We sure do. Very
Yeah.
lovely.
really
Knock on wood, long may it continue.
Yes.
It was so nice meeting you.
No, but thank you so much. You've been so generous, really. And I could be